When I was little, like 5 or 6, we went to this park near our house that had this amazing pond. I was always fascinated with the small creatures, the water bugs, the fish, the algae, everything. So I was squatting down, staring at this incredible little universe, completely enchanted with it all, when suddenly something green came out of the water and grabbed my little shoe and pulled. It happened in an instant. My foot slid forward into the water and I fell backwards onto my butt. It was back in the water with a tiny splash as fast as lightning. I blinked, then got up and ran to my mom, screaming, "Something grabbed my foot and tried to pull me into the water." My mother tried to console me, saying that my foot simply slipped on the muck, but I know the truth. So, heads up to anyone who lives in Milwaukee. The pond in Cozy Park on 7th and Lincoln has a really scary cryptid creature. Only unknown creature I have ever seen was off the coast of Vancouver. I put a flashlight into the water and it was suddenly surrounded by hundreds of razor thin, I guess, worms that reflected the light. I've been back hundreds of times after that and have not seen them ever again. I've also looked in dozens of marine biology books documenting sea life in that area, and not a single one had whatever those creepy creatures were. I was solo backpacking in an area I'm extremely familiar with to test out some new gear before a more serious backpacking trip. It was about 5 p.m., and I was around 7,000 feet in the Sierra Nevada mountains outside of Tahoe on a ridge with a very breathtaking and interesting outcropping. The stone was very geometric, and when you knocked on it, it rang like a hollow storage tank. It was really cool. I kept some pieces of the rock actually because I found them very interesting. As I'm putting the rocks I picked up into my backpack for the hike down to a spot I'd selected earlier for camping, I suddenly hear a fluttering noise, not unlike a pigeon landing. I turn my head quickly, but without much thought to see the bird, and what I see instead is a praying mantis. This mantis was at least 5 feet long. It stood very erect, and its abdomen was curved to a very extreme angle, allowing it to stand roughly chest height with me. I'm 6 feet. I was crouched down, so the thing was eye level. It grabbed a piece of food I had been eating and stared at me as it ate it, and its wings popped out and it just flew off. I felt very nauseous and had a very bad migraine afterwards, which isn't strange as I suffer from some cluster headaches at times. I chalk it up to dehydration and a migraine, but the memory was so real. So, I am an outdoorsman. I'm very experienced in hunting, camping, hiking, and just general survival. I'm very familiar and used to wildlife, and I was charged by what I believe was a cryptid called a dogman. It charged me on my cousin. This creature wasn't a bear. A bear cannot move how it did, and it was not a normal wolf, as they can't comfortably run on 2 legs, whereas what charged us seemed natural at doing it. This happened around June or July of 2007. I was around 17 years old and was more than cocky at that point, but still somewhat knowledgeable of the outdoors. My family used to own a cabin in northwest Wisconsin. I basically grew up there in the summer, and I knew the woods well, but at night it was wise to stay in the cabin or at least by the bonfire by the beach. This was due to bears and wolves and cougars and the lot. One of the creepiest things was if you were having a bonfire, the tree line was visible from the fire pit and beach, and at night you always felt like you were being watched from the tree line. But during the day, the woods always seemed normal, not so creepy, but that is until this very incident. So this happened somewhere between midday and about 2 o'clock. Me and my cousin were having this awesome airsoft battle. I was in full woodland camo, and he wasn't. I retreated onto the ATV trail into the woods for a tactical advantage, and our battle took us around 200 meters in, and about a third of the way up the trail. We had enough at this point, and were standing on the edge of the clearing of the trail talking, and he was maybe 10 feet from me when I decided to mess with him. I shushed him and said, "We're being watched." He froze. Then I realized that the woods were dead quiet, and I ended up getting spooked and started scanning the tree line feverishly on the other edge of the clearing from left to right when I saw it. Its teeth gave it away. It was panting and staring at my cousin. Listen, I don't expect you to believe me, but what I saw was a wolf as big as a black bear, at least 300 pounds. But it wasn't normal. This wolf was on two legs, crouching next to the tree, and its arm grasping the tree, grasping with a clawed hand. It had reddish brown fur. I told my cousin that we have to go. And the next thing I know, he is sprinting, and I look back at the wolf, who had locked on and began sprinting a few steps on his two legs. As soon as the wolf creature dropped onto four legs, I took off as well. It charged us and sounded right on our asses, barreling through the brush. But for whatever reason, it let us go when we broke out of the tree line and headed for the cabin. What stuck with me the most was the sheer size of this animal. The wolf appeared to be nearly 7 feet tall when upright, and that where it should have had front paws, it appeared to have large clawed talons. Now, I'm not sure how to explain it away rationally, but I have heard wolves will occasionally kind of walk upright, but as far as I know, they can't sprint on two legs. Nor do wolves get that big, and black bears more waddle on two legs. The closest description is silly, a werewolf or a dogman. Thanks for reading. When I was younger, I was playing outside of my apartment complex with a friend. She went to the bathroom, so I waited for her outside of my apartment, which was in front of hers. It was an overcast day, and I looked up and I saw this big black bird-looking thing flying overhead. Like it wasn't bird-sized at all. It was like the size of a tiny plane. It made no noise, and I'm sure it wasn't a plane. I was so freaked out that when I went inside and sat on the couch, my mom had to pry out answers from me. To this day, I don't know what it was. The only thing I can really compare it to is one of those Thunderbird things, but they're supposed to be extinct, right? So one night, I was driving through northern Florida on my way down to my parents' winter home with a friend. We were in some backwoods, desolate area on SR 19, and you could only see in front of you, probably as far as the headlights would go. Past that is just pitch darkness. We were even joking with one another that if everything just dropped off, then we wouldn't have any chance of seeing it. But right when we were joking, suddenly we both watched this huge, black, cat-like creature slink across the highway. It was just beyond the reach of our headlights, like you could barely see it, but as we got closer, you could make it out just a little and see the reflective eyes. I know there are panthers in Florida, but they're tan, and I severely doubt they get as big as this one was. My friend and I were both just like, what the heck? What was that? We were in our late teens, and both of us were the adventurous type, and not very easily scared, but that thing was freaking creepy and freaked me the hell out. I still have no idea what that thing was. I was in a bus driving through Algonquin Provincial Park from the direction of Aurelia, don't remember which highway, and I was looking out the window as the train went by, and I saw this big beige or light brown animal, like 10 feet tall, leaning up against a tree with its front paws on the tree. It looked like a bear, but it was much bigger than other bears I've seen before. I've seen a grizzly bear in the wild before when I was a kid, and this thing was probably a good 3 feet taller than a polar bear I've seen in the zoo. This was not the color of a polar bear, however. It was like beige or light brown. This was in Ontario. I was 7 or 8, and I had seen the top of someone's head walk across the kitchen window at night. The hair was dark brown, almost black. I remember screaming and my parents running out the door to see who it was. The only thing is, that window was about 10 feet off the ground. It is possible that it could have been a human, but we live in a pretty remote area and knew our neighbors well, none of which were 10 feet tall. I sometimes wonder what the fuck I saw that night. The story is fresh. I live up in northern Canada, like really north. It's a small city surrounded by untouched nature. The next city is about an 18-hour drive. Days following up to this, I was obsessed with reading skinwalker stories. Like it's all I've been reading for about 2 days before this happened. One day last summer, me and my boyfriend went out on a drive to a lake to smoke. It was about 30 minutes out of the city limits and included driving down a long, winding dirt road I've never drove out on before. Halfway through, the smell of just this putrid, rotten meat came through inside the closed truck. Like, all of a sudden. There are no cabins around the area. The lake is only a boat launch, so nobody is around. Really, really, really strong smell of rotten meat. It couldn't have been a dead animal, because unless it was in our back seat, it couldn't have smelled that strong. I got scared, so I turned around and got out of there. About 10 minutes later, the smell just disappeared, like a snap, just gone. I don't really want to dive more into this because it still really creeps me out, but on the drive back, we saw lots and lots of foxes staring at the truck as we drove by. Like an ungodly amount, like out of the ordinary, probably about 30. Weeks later, I started having vivid nightmares. They might have even been night terrors. I don't even know how to begin describing the intensity of these nightmares. Every single night, I would dream about this black shadow watching over me. Then I would either get flipped upside down or be lifted up to the ceiling every single night. I started to avoid sleep. I couldn't sleep alone or actually be alone. I could always feel a dark presence around me. Then the next second, it's just gone. This continued for months. My parents started praying for me, family started praying for me, and I started praying every night. Eventually it just went away, around the start of December. I haven't gotten any of these nightmares or sleep paralysis episodes ever since.